Hi, everybody. It's Duncan from PJ Library. I am so excited to welcome author Leslie Kimmelman joining us for a virtual visit today. You may know Leslie probably best known for her Sam and Charlie and Sam 2 series. We have several of those books that we offer through PJ Library, but I think maybe my personal favorite, the Rabbi Slurps Spaghetti. But welcome, Leslie.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you.
So since I opened there talking about a couple of your books, I really do want to know how you get inspiration for these great stories that you write, particularly those two.
That's probably the question I get asked most, and I guess most authors would say that too. And the answer is I get them from all different places. Sometimes it's something I read, or something I hear, or a place I visit. For the Sam and Charlie books, I wanted to write a story first of all, I wanted to write a story that was for kids who had sort of outgrown picture books but weren't quite ready for long chapter books. And I wanted it to be about friends who are Jewish, but it wasn't explicitly only about things that were Jewish. So in the Sam and Charlie books, it ended up so that about half of the stories are about celebrating Jewish holidays, and the other half are just regular things that they do. Hopefully they reflect some Jewish values, like, taking care of people when they're sick and doing kind things. But that was the inspiration. And a few people have asked me about the characters themselves, and I will say that they basically came out of my imagination, except I had a friend in camp named Charlie, who I thought that was the coolest name. Back in those days, Charlie was not a common name for girls. And I have to say that Charlie is probably a little bit like me. First of all, her hair. I don't know if you can see, but my hair is usually fairly out of control. And these days, even more so because I can't get to the hair cutter. And Charlie is sort of this independent, creative, slightly sassy, but also insecure in some ways character that I really identify with. So I guess, every time you write, the character has a little bit of you in it. And I guess she does have some of me in it. The stories themselves are just imaginary.
Do kids come up to you during readings or when you meet them and say, that's me, I felt like you were talking about me in the book?
Sometimes, and I actually had someone come up to me and say that they had a son named Charlie who had a son named Sam who had a friend named Charlie. So that was kind of cool. But cool. Yeah, once in a while.
What I love about your book, The Rabbi Slurps Spaghetti, is that it's this great combination of some humor and kind of a surprise ending. I would spoil it if you haven't read it, but it's just a fun book. How did that idea come to you?
When I read it at JCC or at a synagogue class, a synagogue program, I always ask at the end, is there any kind of book that you feel like you're missing? And someone came up to me and said, there's really no book about what a rabbi does. And I was completely surprised that seemed impossible. But I looked around, and really the only book that I had found was something from the 80s called Ima on the Bima, which was a fabulous, groundbreaking book. But it seemed like it was ripe for a new book about that same topic. So I started writing. It took a couple of different tries. And I sort of modeled the rabbi after my rabbi, who is a wonderful, kind, and caring rabbi, a real mensch, but also kind of funny. Although he swears to me that he does not slurp his spaghetti. I don't know. But he was kind of the model for the story.
Oh, I love it. So when you get an idea, in this case, the idea came from previous readings, what is a day in your life like when you're sitting down to write? Are you sitting at the computer? Are you jotting with a pad? How do you take the story into a book form?
I'm very jealous of authors who say, oh, I sit down every day in front of my computer from 10 to 12 and I make sure I've written X number of pages. I don't have a life that works that way. I have a crazy life. I'm taking care of way too many people, parents, kids, and I work. And so I actually, before I write anything down, I have sort of worked a lot of the story out in my head. So when I'm usually when I'm driving or when I'm lying asleep at night and can't sleep, or when I'm in the shower or taking a walk, I'm thinking about the story. And by the time I sit down at the computer, I have a lot of it already worked out. Now, I will say one thing that I really like about being an author is that I think you never really know where a story is going to take you. And sometimes you sit down to write something and you think it's going to go from A to B and it ends up going from A to G. You know, the story takes you in a completely different direction than you had planned. I'm thinking, I did this one book, which PJ distributes, called The Little Red Hen and the Passover Matzah. And when I first started to write that, the idea from it came from an article I read that was talking about when the matzah machine was first invented, which was in the 19th century. And before then, matzah had always been made by hand. And there were these real artists who were bakers who would make matzah. They would roll it out into wonderful shapes like flowers and houses and bunny rabbits. And it was a real art form. And so when the matzah machine was invented, they knew that their time was drawing to a close. And they were very upset, and there was a big fight about matzah machines. So my idea was to write a story about some small town where a baker, you know, was fighting the inevitable and trying to keep her business together. And I started writing, and I couldn't make it work as a story. And somehow, I wish I remembered how, I ended up instead telling the Little Red Hen with a Passover update. I don't even remember how that popped into my head. Maybe one of my kids' books. I don't know.
That's funny. I'm curious if Runaway Latkes had a similar origin story.
The Runaway Latkes, actually, my son at the time loved the Runaway. Actually, was it the Runaway Ginger? Was it the Gingerbread Man?
Gingerbread Man, yeah.
The Gingerbread Man, but also John Lithgow did a sung version of Runaway Pancakes. It was very funny, and my son was really into it. And I just thought, what a great idea for a Passover story. So that's how that one came about. They all come from, you know, a million places. I did a book many years ago called Everybody Bonjours that came from a postcard my father sent to my daughter when she was 4 years old. He was on a trip to France, and he sent a postcard to her that said, "I'm in France where everybody bonjours. The men bonjour, the women bonjour, even the cows bonjour." And 25 years later, I wrote a book called Everybody Bonjours, which was then followed by Everybody Says Shalom. But sometimes ideas take a long time to make it into a book.
Oh, I love that. What a great piece of insight behind that. So how are you finding this weird time that we're in where everybody's staying at home? How is that affecting your writing? Is it better for your writing or worse?
You know, I wish I could say it was better. I wish I could say, oh, I finally have time to sit down and write. But honestly, there's too much going on. And I also find it's hard to think creatively when all my energy is just going through getting through the next day. In some ways, I mean, I'm now finally, I feel like I'm sort of getting in the swing of things, and I have a few ideas going through my head. And I also am lucky that I have a few books coming out next year, which I have been able to work on that were already written, but I'm working on different stages. And if I can, I'd love to share one of the books coming out next year is a new Sam and Charlie book. It's called Sam and Charlie and Sam Too Help Save the Earth. And it's all about the things they do to protect our planet. And I just last week got some sketches, so I'm going to hold them up. This one is the cover for these stories. I don't know if it's backwards there, but it's called
No,
Sam
it's perfect,
Charlie.
yeah.
Yeah. And they're having a bike parade there. They're thinking of all different ways that even as kids, they can help protect the planet. And here's one more. This is from one of the stories about a holiday that's coming up called Shavuot. And it's the holiday that you eat lots of blintzes on, which is one of my favorite foods. So here they are. eating blintzes and making up 10 extra commandments, because Shavuot is all about the 10 commandments. And they are making extra commandments to help protect the earth. So that one's coming out next spring, and I'm very excited. It's really cute.
I love it. Families are going to be so excited. Great to have both Shavuot stuff in there and some environmentally active kids. That's awesome.
Yeah, right now it's all about tikkun olam, I think. You know, what can we do to help heal the earth right now and heal each other? So, yeah, it seems like good timing for that book.
That's wonderful. Looking forward to that. I have to tell you personally, I am such a big Sesame Street fan. And since you've worked for Sesame Workshop and you've been an editor and a publisher and a writer for Sesame Street books, I'm so curious, what is it like trying to get in the tone of some of these characters that are 50 years old? So last year of Sesame Street, I think I got the year right. Last year celebrated 50 years of Sesame Street. So what is it like coming in and writing in the voices of these characters?
Well, I've been really lucky. I've actually been there for half of those 50 years. I've worked there for 24 and a half years. So I have to say by now, not only can I write in their voices, but I feel like I've turned into some of those characters, especially Cookie Monster. But, you know, the more you hang around them, the easier it gets. And of course, the hard work has already been done by the puppeteers and by the writers of the show, who have done such really wonderful, well-rounded characters. And seeing them on TV makes it even easier to write. They all have very specific phrases that they use and likes and dislikes. And it gets easier as time goes on to write in their voices. Also, I don't know if you know the character Julia, who is fairly new to the show. She's about 2 years old now. She came on the show, and she's this adorable little female Muppet who has autism. She's on the autism spectrum. And I was lucky enough to actually be the person that created her character. So she's very easy for me to write for, because I was the one who said she likes music, she likes to sing, she likes art. I got down a little book just in case you haven't seen her. That's her with the orange hair.
Yeah.
But that's unusual. Usually I'm taking a character that already exists. And even with Julia, now that she's on the show, she, the puppeteer has added to her character, and the writers for the show have added to her character. So she's really not my character at all anymore. I just started her. So, but working for Sesame Street is amazing. It's an awesome thing. And the characters are so much fun to write for.
That's wonderful. I do remember the news that came out around Julia when when the character was being developed. So it's really cool to know that you were behind the formation of her place in the show and in books.
She started as a character. They started a autism initiative, and it started as something that existed just on the web, just on the internet, and also as a book. And so that's where I came in, and me and a lot of people at Sesame Street had been wanting to do something like that for a long time, and had some personal experience with this whole area, and that's how she came about, and she's terrific.
Leslie Kimmelman, thank you so much for joining us for a virtual visit. I had such a great time talking with you.
And vice versa. And everyone stay safe. And the one great thing about this being confined to your house is that it's a great time for reading. I've never had so much time for reading in my life. So read some books and enjoy yourselves and stay safe, and know that you're all loved, and there are lots of people looking out for you. And thanks, Duncan.
Thanks, Leslie.
Bye-bye.
Bye.